Tom McDonald was taking some flack because he did a collab with Ben Shapiro, who supports Israel's war in Gaza. And so people are not saying, I'm done with Tom McDonald. He supports a man who supports genocide, yada, yada. Have you been, I mean, I presume you've been following it. I know you're vocal about it.
Oh, I was over there fighting the other day. I'm just back from the Middle East.
That's a joke, everybody out there. I think, who knows? You saw the International Court of Justice's recent ruling?
Yes, the International Court of Justice. That's all I ever think about is the International Court of Justice. When were they last relevant? I ask you, what decade was the International Court of Justice last relevant in your humble opinion? Tell me their monumental last decision that was enforced by their edict.
Hold on, let me just.
I'll wait. I'll wait till you find.
Well, I was going to say
the International House of Pancakes is much more power than the International Court of Justice. I'd rather go to IHOP and get pancakes than the International Court of Justice to get justice.
Give me a break. It was created in 1946. Did they do the Nuremberg trials?
They oversaw that, but right, they have nothing to do with that now. I mean, that's a long time ago.
Who are the members of the International Court of Justice?
There's Babe Ruth. He was in right field. There's Lou Gehrig over at first. I mean, give me a break. What are you kidding me? This is not. We have problems with our own Supreme Court. We're going to listen to some guys in Brussels. Where do they live? Where's their headquarters?
It is Brussels, is it not?
Right. Okay, I'll go with Brussels for 20.
Oh, hold on. Let me just Google.
Yeah, just to make sure.
International Court of Justice
headquarters. Right. HQ.
The Hague. So it's
the Hague,
in the Netherlands. Okay. And what's the connection to Jack Smith? Tell everybody. Yeah. We all know it, but what's Jack Smith been accused of, and what's he been doing these days?
He was the war crimes tribunal lawyer for, I guess, the International Court of Justice during the Bosnian War, if that's humanly possible.
It's unbelievable. So I read through the decision. So first of all, it's an interim decision, an interim injunction enjoining Israel to do that which Israel will undoubtedly say it's already doing, to not, genocide a country, not create unnecessary or avoidable civilian casualties. Just by the sheer numbers of it, you can't be totally insensitive to it. It's something like 26,000 Palestinians have been killed since the invasion, or since October 7, I should say, where 1,200 Israelis and foreign nationals were killed. So you can't undermine that, and you can't minimize that.
Why
the
not?
vast majority of women.
Why can't I minimize that?
No, because you can't.
I don't hear the numbers coming out of Ukraine every day. Why can't I minimize that? It's 300,000 dead Ukrainians. I never hear about that.
Well, what I mean to say is minimize in terms of gravity, not in terms of the number. But you agree on the number. But then the question is going to be, why so many casualties? Well,
I don't know where the number's coming from. Where's it coming from, the number?
That might be a good question. Whether or not it's
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And
that's okay. I mean, when you invade a sovereign nation, shit happens. I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, I didn't ask them to invade. They didn't ask them to invade. They're flying in on hang gliders, for Christ's sakes. I mean, I can't weep for them now because they launched a scurrilous invasion against civilians. I'm sorry. It's hard for me to wrap my empathetic mind around their problems.
I can be empathetic, but you can't deny the obvious, which is well. Let's get here. This is from the decision. One of the paragraphs 41, and it says the court recalls that in accordance with Article 1 of the Convention, this is the Convention Against Genocide. Mm-hmm. All state parties thereto have undertaken, quote, to prevent and to punish, end quote, the crime of genocide. And this is, you ask anybody this question, they will not have an answer. And if you read it to them, they will not believe your answer. How is
I saw you put this up this morning about the definition.
How is genocide defined in
I said this the other day. They have their own woke language, their own dictionary. In the 1990s, the New York Times and some other groups actually published urban slang dictionaries regarding hip hop and other new cultural events, and put out urban dictionaries. We need a woke dictionary. Somebody has got to publish a dictionary to explain what these terms mean. When they say genocide, they mean something completely different than the rest of the world knows to be genocide, the elimination of a race for their existence as a race, and killing them, crushing them, destroying them, kind of like the Third Reich did as an industrial genocide against the Jews in Germany and Eastern Europe during the 30s and 40s. They changed the definitions of everything. And if you don't catch up, they accuse you of not agreeing with them about their new definition of genocide. Can you put that back up and show the definition?
Boom shakalaka. Okay. Article 2, listen to this. In the present convention, this is the Convention of the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide.
Okay.
When was it? Hold on, I want to see.
1948, right after the war.
Let's listen to this. The definition of genocide. In the present convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with the intent to destroy in whole or in part. And that's very relevant.
Okay, so that contradicts the actual definition of genocide right there.
Well,
because genocide means whole, not in part, and all these other mumbo.
Well, but not just that, because in part, and I'm not trying to be glib or smarter than a lawyer, could mean one person.
Okay. And look at part B, causing.
Well, no, we're getting there. So hold on,
because it's absurd. It's absurd
to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such, killing members of the group.
Seven members of the group. Seven.
Yep. This is causing serious bodily or mental harm.
Mental harm. I'm filled with anxiety is genocide. I'm really nervous about the bombings.
Wait until we get to E, because E is going to be relevant for another purpose. C, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. Imposing measures intended to prevent births within a group. That I definitely understand. E, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. I'm going to bring this one back because it's particularly relevant when you're talking about the kids that were just kidnapped in Israel, literally kidnapped by Hamas and then transferred to other terrorist organizations within Palestine. My point with this was, if that's the definition of genocide, and let's just operate on that basis, all right, you can agree with the ICJ's interim injunction. Have they issued one against Hamas for what they did on October 7, because that, by this very definition, would be genocide, acts of genocide, killing members of a group. Have they applied it to Hamas, whose charter is, whether or not people think from the river to the sea when someone in the West uses it without knowing the history, thinks that that's not a genocidal organization entity? Have they issued any such rulings, pressure on Hamas? And the answer is obviously not. And in which case you say, okay, well, then you have this International Court of Justice, which is politically motivated partisan hackery. And if you agree with this decision, you surely have to agree with what Hamas did on October 7 was an act of genocide. And Hamas itself is a genocidal government that rules over the Palestinian people. And if that's the case, what do you do from there?
It's a death cult. I don't even want to give them the gravitas of being an organization or a government or anything else. This is a death cult. They're willing to use their children to die, themselves to die. You can't negotiate with a death cult. It's like negotiating with the Hale-Bopp Comet people who are going to commit suicide, or Jim Jones. It's a preposterous balance that you can't really ever rectify. They're willing to die instead of negotiating with you. They're saying that they will never recognize your existence as a nation. They won't accept a two-state solution. Every single opportunity, to quote Golda Meir, the Palestinians have never missed an opportunity to miss an opportunity. That's just a fact. And as everyone knows, if the Palestinians laid down their weapons, there would be peace in the Middle East today. If the Israelis laid down their weapons, they'd be overrun in 72 hours and annihilated. So we've got a indirectly insane balance of power here. The only thing keeping the Israelis alive is that they have nuclear weapons.
We got all thrust, no rudder. $20 says, thank you for coming on board tonight, Mark. Another great Sunday discussion. And then we have one more, which I still can pull up here. It says, Linda Welker, how can we prevent the MSM from agenda setting the way things are this political season and beyond? You have to turn them off. It's like that episode of The Simpsons where they're, one of the Halloween House of Horror ones, where just don't look, and speak loud so that people understand.
I've got more solutions than that, because I want the FCC to enforce the license regulations and reinstall the fair play laws that were taken out during the 80s. I think that there is plenty of muscle that can be used to rein in the mainstream media once the administration changes. And that includes the FCC enforcing current guidelines. They do not own those channels. We, the American people, own those channels. We are licensing them those channels. There has to be a tribunal in the FCC where the heads of these networks are brought in under oath, under the bright lights of congressional hearings, confronted with false news, phony disinformation, and forced to say under oath why that is airing on their networks under threat of revocation of licensure. Thanks.
You're a smart man. I can't disagree with that. There's a $5 from Keith Noah in YouTube, and there's a $25 from Beavis Wallace. Good to see you again. I'm members of both of your locals. Question. I'm sure U.S. agencies, CIA, etc., would love to make Trump sleep with the fishes. What other countries would like to and could do something like that?
Well, don't forget, Zelensky, in a feeble attempt, invited him to Kiev last week. And I thought, like, yeah, he's jumping on a plane to go to Kiev. But I mean, Zelensky was told, hey, this was, plan F. They're up to F, let's say. Invite him over. Let's see if he'll take the bait on that one. Zelensky said, all right, I did it. He didn't call me back. But yeah, they've got F, G, H, I, K, W, N, O, P plans up the kazoo to deal with this situation. And they're rolling through them step by step, I think.
There's one more.
By the way, I also predict, because Biden has no rallies, and this happened yesterday for the first time in Las Vegas, I predicted 3 nights ago, they will begin to attempt to disrupt the Trump rallies with goons and various deep state operatives. So keep in mind, that's going to happen now. How the Trump people handle it is going to be interesting. But I saw them dragging people out yesterday in Las Vegas, and this will continue because they have to stop the Trump rallies. He has no rallies, Biden. He cannot allow this massive amount of people to go unmolested for 9 more months.
Yeah, they can't rely on COVID again to
all right,
to interrupt the rallies for him. Why was Netanyahu funding Hamas? Was it to prevent the two-state solution with chaos? Why aren't they targeting leadership in Qatar? So, and Mark,
why did Kennedy shoot himself in the head?
Well, no. The funding of Hamas is a legitimate objection. It's one. Now, it's not funding Hamas because he's not cutting them a check. He's letting briefcases of cash cross from Israel to Palestine. The argument is that it's humanitarian support. The obvious reality is that it goes to people, and Hamas, the gangsters, take it from them. And so if we're going to hold Biden's feet to the fire for releasing $10 billion or $6 billion in assets to Iran under the pretext that, well, it's only humanitarian aid. Well, good. Every dollar in humanitarian aid means that Iran doesn't have to spend it on money. They can spend it on whatever. So
I very rarely hear people complaining about General Sisi in Egypt and the equal amount of money that we give to the defense of the state of Egypt. Nobody ever says anything about Egypt, which is a brutal military dictatorship, Viva. And I very rarely hear any human outcry in the United States on the left about the amount of money that we send to the Egyptian military to suppress their own people.
No, well, I think people are getting wise to it because people are saying,
okay,
well, geez, Louise, at some point we're funding both ends of this conflict. You're giving humanitarian aid to the Palestinians, knowing it's going to Hamas. You're releasing billions to Iran, knowing that they're using it to fund Hamas. And then you're saying, well, we'll supply arms to Israel. It's a great.
Oh, no, I agree with that premise. I mean, the giving of the billions of dollars to Iran. I mean, that's an international war crime. He should be brought up on war crimes just for that. That's insane.
Well, and now to that, I say it's somewhat analogous to what Netanyahu has been allowing to happen by transferring cash.
I'm not buying that one. I'm not buying that one, bro.
Snuggle Struggle says, speaking of invasion, every needless death of an American by those illegally crossing our borders is blood on the Biden administration's hands.
Yeah.
Biden ignorantly, hopefully, forced Americans into harm's way. And I'll just read Eves because it came up while we're doing this. How do they get through the most secure? Dude, I've got my questions about how it happened, the extent to which it happened, and I think that needs to be answered because you're going to say, okay, it was the biggest intelligence failure in Israel's history. Now let's rely on that same intelligence to wage a proper response. That's a legitimate question that I have that I get.
I've said this to you before. I think it was the Five Eyes duping them into putting their guard down during the holidays, and I think that they believed that what the CIA and NSA were telling them was true. And I think that was...
But Mark, that's a big problem because it's one of two things. It's either the biggest intelligence failure in Israel's history or something much more nefarious, which, much more nefarious, sort of the Lee Hops where you can say, well, now we got
to... It's the equivalent of fighting the Japanese in World War II, a year into the war, and still harping about Pearl Harbor. Either you're going to kill all the Japanese and fight the war, or you're going to sit there talking about Pearl Harbor for 5 years.
True.
I mean, at some point, you got to get it on.
That is the obvious.
I mean, obviously, they had tribunals about Pearl Harbor. The admirals were castigated. They didn't want to remove their own admirals because they were just starting a war. That would have been like cutting your own throat. So what is the point? What is the point? Your nation is under attack. Should they have hearings on TV and put these guys in jail? I mean, is that going to help the state of Israel?
It might actually. I mean,
Okay.
it might, and
Okay.
that might be. And that was what I sort of proposed from day one.
Okay.
You can't, I'm not relying on the people who just blew it to have a proper response. And for those who think or want to argue that this was pretextual, so that Netanyahu could have his excuse to never have a two-state solution, raise more of Gaza, either appropriate the land or create a bigger buffer zone. It's a convenient tragedy, and I can't blame people for thinking that.